when you're passionate about something, you really put much more into it. And this took me places where, well, I never really imagined. I never thought I would be working in tech. And here I am.
If you don't get the engagement right, you don't have an opportunity to teach.
Be open-minded, and that might take you places where, you wanted to go, or places you maybe haven't even imagined.
I think it's terribly important to insist on individual values.
Learning Culture Podcast.
Initiative, creation, all these things which we value. It's now possible to make organizations on a larger scale than was ever possible before.
Learning Culture Podcast.
Teach people to analyze the kind of things that are said to them.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Learning Culture Podcast. I am your host, Andrew Barry, and this is a show where we explore how to build learning-driven cultures that unlock the full potential of people at work. My guest today is Bozena Pajak. She's the VP of Learning and Curriculum at Duolingo. You probably know Duolingo as the app that made language learning feel like a game. But what you might not know is the depth of learning science behind it. And Bozena is right at the center of that. This conversation is all about what happens when you follow your curiosity. Bozena was on a track for a career in academia when a late-night scroll through job postings led her somewhere entirely unexpected. Hint, it's in Pittsburgh. We get to know what makes learning truly stick, why motivation is key, how learning by doing drives results, and how Duolingo blends intuition and data to keep things both fun and effective. Bozena also shares how she leads in a high-growth environment, spotting adaptable talent and making space for learning even in a fast-paced culture. There is so much here for learning designers, team leaders, and anybody curious about the future of education. So let's get into it. Here is my conversation with Bozena Pajak. Bozena, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. So happy to be here.
Yeah, we had the pleasure of doing a panel together in New York City about 4 months ago. And you and I caught up a lot in between of that panel discussion. And there's so much that I want to go deeper on with you in your role at Duolingo. But first, I want to start this with where your journey with Duolingo began, because there's a really interesting story of like how the stars just aligned, right, for you to get this role. So can you take us back and tell me the story the way you were telling me that night in New York?
Yeah, it's a good story, and I always say that it was written in the stars because it definitely feels that way. So at the time, that was 2015. I was a researcher and a lecturer at Northwestern University in the linguistics department and the cognitive science program there. And I had my academic career, but I've always had some doubts about whether that was the right path for me. I love doing research. I love my job in many ways, but it just didn't feel maybe as motivating as I wanted it to be. It felt slow. Well, research is just slow. And I just wanted to feel more immediate impact of my work. And so, periodically I would talk with my husband about this. I'm like, oh, well, what else could I do? Maybe I should do more applied research. Maybe I should leave academia. And in one of those conversations, in early 2015, my husband asked me, "Okay, well, if you were to pick any company to work at, what company would that be?" And I immediately said Duolingo, because I knew about it. I was using it. I loved the product. And I thought, oh, well, actually, that seems like a company where my skill set would be useful, because in my academic work, my research was on language learning. And so that was my expertise. So I thought, yeah, maybe that company. And so in that conversation, we opened up Duolingo's website, just checked what jobs they were hiring for. And there was this job that was literally written like for me. Everything felt right. Duolingo was looking for someone with a PhD in linguistics or a related field, someone with experience teaching languages, someone who had some more computational experience to communicate better with engineers, someone, basically everything felt exactly right. And so I just felt like, okay, I need to apply. This is just the best possible job I could have. And so I applied that night, and the next morning I heard back. They invited me for an on-site interview, and then I went there a few weeks later. I spent a day there. I gave a presentation. I had conversations with everyone. And basically at the end, the CEO, Louise Bonan, told me, well, we like you. And, I got the job. And I didn't even have that much time to really process that, okay, well, I guess I'm leaving academia. What does that mean? I just thought, okay, I need to take this opportunity. Even though, it meant, actually it was a big change and it meant some sacrifices because, well, I had to leave my academic job. It's not that easy to come back. And I had to move to Pittsburgh. I was in Chicago, and my husband was in Chicago with a job that he couldn't move. And so I moved. He stayed in Chicago, and we didn't really know at the time how we would solve this. So yeah, that it was a little bit tough, but I just knew, and my husband was supportive, that, okay, I just need to take these opportunities and no regrets.
Yeah, that's meant to be. And where was Duolingo as a company at the time? Like what were they, how were they positioned?
So Duolingo at the time was still a pretty small startup. We were about 45 people when I joined. And at the time, it was actually pretty amazing that the company was so small because, it was already pretty well known as a product at that time. We had no business model. In fact, it was like a taboo to even talk about making money. We were just trying to build a great product.
Yeah.
Something that would be great at teaching people languages, and be very fun. And that's what we were just thinking about. How do we build a great product? And let's worry about the business side later on. So at the time, it was really a lot of kind of play and fun, working hard. Everyone worked really hard, but we were all very passionate about what we were doing. And we also got very close. The whole group. We socialized a lot. There were parties all the time. We just went out after work. It was a great environment. Still is.
Yeah. So yeah, and you're at what, around 800 now? Is that right?
Yes, 850. Yeah, maybe more.
So yeah, massive 20x growth since you began there. And yeah, just crazy how that job was just there written for you. I think also a nice, interesting, like sort of side lesson here is that you didn't overthink it. You just did it. And like maybe if you had thought about it more and all the challenges you had to overcome, you wouldn't have made the move.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I always try to encourage others to really take the opportunities that come up. And yes, exactly like what you're saying, not overthink it, because it's so easy to just think too much and think about the pros and cons and like, and in my case, well, it was just a startup. Maybe it wouldn't even work out. What am I doing? So, but just identifying opportunities and taking them, and then, maybe like it was a possibility that Duolingo didn't work out, but I think maybe then I would have jumped to something else. There's always another opportunity, and it's so easy to miss them. And so I definitely encourage people to look for them, identify them, and take them. And of course, sometimes there are sacrifices you will not be willing to take, but just be willing to take some. Be open-minded, and that might take you places where you wanted to go, or places you maybe haven't even imagined.
Yeah, I love that point. That I think sometimes we hold back from doing things if we think that there's no way back, like there's no way to like reverse the decision. And what I'm getting from your take, and I think I agree with this, is that you don't have to reverse the decision. You jump to one stone, and if that stone doesn't work out, you can jump to the next one. You don't have to go backwards.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And so you're at a different stone. You'll have new opportunities that you don't even know from that next step.
Exactly.
So, yeah. All right. I think this is a cool theme that we may come back to, especially if we start to talk about AI and maybe some of the risks and opportunities you've taken with the product. But I want to touch on something you mentioned to me, and you've talked about. You're a big fan of sort of interdisciplinarity, right? So, you have a background in linguistics, cognitive science, you tango, you're interested in like a lot of different things. I'm curious how sociology as well, international relations, how do your background across all these the very diverse fields play into and prepare you for building learning experiences?
I feel like in my job at Duolingo, it all really came together, which is kind of amazing. That's why this is like the perfect job I could possibly have, because all those experiences and skills I've developed that may have seemed kind of random at times, somehow they really all help me in my job. So, well, obviously my background in linguistics and cognitive science, research on how people learn, how we should be teaching, well, that's kind of the core of it. It gives me the knowledge of, okay, how we should be building experiences that are really based in science. But then I have the experience actually as a learner, language learner in particular. In my life, I've been passionate about learning languages. I've always liked it. And just kind of dabbling in many languages and then trying to learn them myself that has really given me a lot of empathy for others trying to do the same. Then I got experience teaching languages. I did some tutoring when I was younger, but then later during grad school, that was actually the source of my funding, which is also interesting. Like, that isn't something I actually chose to do, but to get funding for my PhD, I was offered basically teaching in the language program, and I taught Spanish for a few years there, and I taught, and I also got promoted on the way, and then I was supervising other teachers, training them. I got experience with curriculum design because the director of the Spanish program really wanted to revamp the program and was really open to my ideas. So that was sort of great experience that I didn't think would really be that helpful otherwise, but then ended up giving me that hands-on experience to build learning experiences on Duolingo. And then there's sociology and international relations, which I feel like in general have prepared me to understand the world better and have more of this kind of cultural understanding, how different cultures work, how people operate. Like in sociology, I studied a lot of kind of social psychology, working in small groups, how group dynamics work, or anthropology, just like how people's cultures develop. All these things, I think, help me in this collaborative workspace where we really need to work effectively with people with all sorts of backgrounds and all sorts of skill sets. And yeah, I feel without that background, I would have been more lost. And so this has also prepared me to be a better manager in many ways. So it just feels like everything has come together.
Yeah. Without it being planned, obviously, right?
Yeah, no, I did not plan. It's like, okay, I will do this and that. And actually, that's maybe an interesting thing to reflect on, because, of course, you can plan your career and you can try to do everything that you think is right for some goal that you have. But I think it may be a mistake, because if you're doing that and on the way, maybe you're not that excited about what you're doing, maybe that's not the right path. I've always tried to just pursue things I've been passionate about, and my interests changed, or I discovered something that, oh, actually I'm interested in this even more than I was in this other thing. And I hopped on that, and that turned out to be a great strategy, because when you're passionate about something, you really put much more into it. And this took me places where, well, I never really imagined. I never thought I would be working in tech. And here I am. So that's kind of another piece of advice I often give to people. Really, just don't pursue something unless you're excited about it.
Yeah, no, that's well said. And yeah, often we do it. I think back to the beginning of my career, did some things just because it seemed like the right thing to do. I was told it was the right thing to do. And I've definitely had more luck when I follow my curiosity and kind of just go with the things that excite me.
No, actually, during my PhD, what's interesting is that I was actually told not to pursue the research I was pursuing, because I was interested in how adults learn languages later in life. So, the second language acquisition. And in linguistics and cognitive science, at the time at least, that didn't seem like a hot topic. People studied first language acquisition, so just how children learn languages, and then maybe bilingualism, how bilinguals process the languages they know, how they use them. But the kind of like learning a second language later in life, that wasn't a sexy topic. And so I have gotten this advice, no, maybe you should just pivot, do something else. Like, this is not going to be, this is not going to get you far. And I also had supportive PhD advisors who let me do the research I wanted. But, if I had followed that advice, I wouldn't have maybe this job now, because that's exactly what has enabled me to be successful at Duolingo.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so let's transition to your role and specifically the learning design component. Obviously, a lot of people listening to this show are interested in aspects of it. I got to ask you some of these questions in the panel and just like nerd out a little bit on learning and how it works. But let's first start with this idea of also like, when you started at Duolingo, you probably had a vision for where language learning could go. And I would imagine that vision is pretty different to what your vision is now as you individually and the company. And can you speak to any of the evolution or changes in what that vision has been over the last 9 years?
Yes. Well, when I joined Duolingo, I felt like such an expert. I know a lot about how people learn. I can implement a lot of things. This is going to be very effective. We can build something that's just going to teach amazingly well. I had a lot of ideas about how to improve Duolingo. And yes, very quickly I realized, okay, actually, it's not that simple. There are many other parts to it.
People are complex.
Yes. Yeah. And also at Duolingo, it seemed like it was difficult for me to also convince people of certain things and certain directions, and things I thought were obvious. Like they did not find them obvious at all. And so I definitely had this transition, and I think it lasted, well, at least a year, when I was really figuring out how to even operate in that environment. And I learned to think much more about learners and the variety of learners we want to serve, how we want to really think about people around the globe, and they might not be those super motivated students maybe I was used to when I was teaching Spanish.
Yeah, right.
And also having them kind of trapped in the classroom and they have to do it. So I think I definitely initially thought I would be focusing much more on just the nuances of effective teaching. And I ended up really broadening this much more and thinking much more about the motivation and how do we foster motivation? How do we engage people in learning and building that habit and really helping them stick with us, stick with learning. And I learned over the years how important that part is, and how really what's critical is finding that right balance of like, okay, how can we teach you effectively? So we don't want this to just be a fun game, but we want you to feel like it's a fun game and you're enjoying it. And so you want to come back, because if you come back, that's the only way we can teach you. If you don't come back, it doesn't matter how amazing our method is. You're not going to learn anything.
Yeah. So I had a question in there about this, and this is, you kind of got to that topic, which is awesome. So I think this is well framed by the handbook that you guys have released about how you run your business. There's a part in there which says that you are building a forever product that puts the long-term user retention first. So that's the North Star. That's like what you're trying to do here. And you've sort of touched on this now. There's a balance between engagement and effective learning. And like you said, if you don't get the engagement right, you don't have an opportunity to teach and deliver. So what are some of the lessons you've learned, maybe counterintuitive lessons around getting that balance right?
So the way I think about it now is that we really try to always think about the interaction between what's effective and what's fun, because it's easy to think about these separately. Like, okay, well, what can we do to build a really fun experience, and really, what can we add that's really game-like, and we do some of that, but it can quickly evolve into just something that's not that helpful. And then on the other side, you can also think just kind of separately from the fun aspect of like, okay, what can we do that's really effective? And well, what can we do? Well, we know one of the things that's very effective is to actually make it really challenging, kind of put you at the edge of what you know and kind of push you really hard. And that can be very effective for you to learn, but it's pretty unpleasant to learn that way. People don't like that. It's hard. And so what we are trying to do is really stay at the intersection, think about both of these things at the same time. What can we do that's going to be effective, but also fun, or at least, we can make it somehow fun. And that's been the challenge. But that's always what we think about. And it's amazing how even the CEO always just weighs in and like, oh yeah, well, this is great. This seems like a lot of fun, but like, it's going to hurt our teaching. And so let's maybe not do this. And so I feel like collectively as a company, we've overall done a good job of just kind of pushing ahead kind of with both. And that's finding that sweet spot. It's always tough, but that's the goal.
And an ongoing thing, case by case, I'm sure as well. But yeah, what I'm taking away from this is that it's not a binary thing, and it's probably not even. There's like a middle way, basically, right? Like you don't want to overfit for one or the other, but you want to find this middle ground. And you're not. I mean, is it like a checklist where you're like, okay, we need to hit a certain amount of engagement and a certain amount of effectiveness? Do you consider trade-offs between the two? Like, can you break that down one more level, maybe?
It's not as systematic of an analysis as maybe you would think. A lot of it is, generally at Duolingo, the way we operate, a lot of it is based on data, but a lot of it is also based on our intuitions. We test everything internally a lot before we show it to our users. And so within the company, we've all developed really good intuitions about what works in the product, what's going to be, what feels boring, what feels fun, what's actually teaching you something and what isn't. And so we try everything internally a lot to see, okay, do we actually like it? What do we think about it? And, we try to think about certain rules, like, okay, does it meet certain criteria? But it's actually really hard because every feature, every case is pretty different. So we try to come back to kind of some rules, but they're kind of general. Like, okay, is this going to be a crutch for learners, or are we actually developing some skill? And we might discuss that. And then once we implement something, and of course we also have the data from A/B tests, because we can see, okay, are people using the app in this condition? Are they coming back more? And so on.
Yeah. So it's this makes sense. Like it's not something you can codify. You can maybe have some guardrails and constraints put in place, but what this reminds me of is this idea of taste and how to kind of bring AI into this. Like it's becoming clear that as a human trait is so important, right? Like developing a good taste for what good looks like. And is it, and I may be reading between the lines here, and it's also sounding a little bit like what Pixar does with their brains trust meetings and that, where, am I correct in saying that you have some kind of like internal focus group, maybe built up experience of people that you kind of run these ideas by and debate them back and forth because there is no clear answer?
Yeah, exactly. So we have what we call product reviews, where every change to the product goes through product review, and that's where those discussions happen. Kind of at the high level, we want to also make sure that there is consistency across all the things we're building. Now, since we're such a big company, we want to make sure that whatever different teams are producing, it's consistent. It doesn't it interacts well with with everything, and that's where those discussions around kind of engagement learning happen as well. Like, okay, maybe this is not as useful as we would like. And so that's where kind of some feedback is given to teams and direction. And if there's, and those are usually pretty quick teams present something and they get quick reactions. And if sometimes something emerges, like, okay, well, maybe we should have a bigger discussion about it, then maybe we do it in a separate meeting, or maybe we even schedule something separate. But yes, like we do discuss.
Yeah. But in general, you have this bias towards something we talked about at the beginning, which is not to overthink things, get it into the hands of users, test it, get feedback. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. Because we also try to move fast.
Yeah.
Ship it. That's one of our principles. We just try to build things, try to move fast, and then iterate.
Yeah, and I guess that's the benefit of having tenured people who've been around for, as long as you have, for example, who have developed, because that's how you develop taste. Can't go take a course on, like, you have to just build it through experience. And that's, we'll come back to, because I think that's part of your culture that's so interesting to me, is that you do incentivize long-term thinking. And I'm assuming you're not in the minority of people who've been with the company for 9-10 years. I'm assuming that's quite a lot of people who've been there for that long.
Yeah, I think more than typically in companies of this size.
Yeah. Okay, two other things from the philosophy that I want to pull out. So the learning by doing piece, this is something that I think is just so fundamental to the way real learning happens. That's why we emphasize cohort learning experiences and having people work on capstones and projects and all that. Was there anything like a specific learning or experience that you can call back on that really solidified this for you at Duolingo?
I feel like even before Duolingo, I started developing a lot of those intuitions about what matters in learning. And that was just through my own experience learning languages and observing some teachers that did a good job, some teachers where I thought, oh, that didn't work that well, some methods that were used that felt to me more effective than other methods. So because I studied a lot of languages in a lot of different places, I feel like I developed a lot of those intuitions. And then in graduate school, when I started doing research on language learning, I really got fascinated by this whole field of statistical learning, implicit learning, how we as humans are amazing at learning patterns, statistical patterns in our environment, even without realizing it. And it's actually not just humans, other species do that as well. And so our brains are just optimized for this type of learning. This is how we learn our first language. We just get exposure to the language and we pick up the patterns, and it's amazing. And adults do that as well. We still just learn that way. So those kind of basic mechanisms are still there that might work a little bit differently when we are older. But
there's memetics. Is it like mimetic learning? Is that kind of what you're referring to?
I'm not sure. What is that?
So like the like little kids will mimic and copy their words, like phrases and stuff, and then eventually start to scaffold that and build,
So it's deeper than that, and it's more complicated than that. So essentially what our brains are doing is really picking up on statistical regularities, and that happens when we're born, even before we're born. When babies, for example, how they initially start learning a language and making sense of the sounds that they are hearing is they start picking up on certain patterns that some syllables go together more often than other syllables because, well, that's what they hear in the language. So, for example, baby, that often goes together because they hear a lot of baby or doggy. And so on. But something like, what they might hear good doggy, and so they know doggy goes together, but good dog, that's less frequent. I mean, you hear it, you hear good attached to many different words, and turns out that young babies pick up on that, and they. And basically what's been shown in the last few decades now of this research is that they use that information to then scaffold their learning, because that's how they can segment words. So that's what they start knowing where the word boundaries are. And when they know that, they can start attaching meaning to those words. And they learn everything through this observing the relationships. So they might observe that they hear doggy a lot when there are dogs around. Maybe even parents or caregivers point to those dogs, and they start associating that. So it's not just mimicking. Even before they speak, they actually build a lot of that structure in their minds.
Okay, yeah. And so let's translate this to the platform, and how do you replicate that in a language learning setting?
Yeah, so basically, what we know from this research is that people can learn a lot in a way that's implicit, where they don't even realize it. What you need to do is just make sure that those regularities are going to be noticeable to your brain. And so the more you can enhance certain regularities, so maybe there's just a lot of repetition, or you kind of show a certain pattern quite a bit in close proximity so that you notice, okay, there's some verb conjugation, or any kind of grammatical rule, really. If you design it right, you kind of show it together. You might consciously not really notice at all, but your brain will. And so that's what we're trying to implement. So when we design our lessons, we always think about, okay, is this going to be enough for people's brains to really notice over time? And so trying to make patterns more salient, that's kind of the key to what we're trying to do. So we're trying to not distract you with too many other things going on when we're trying to teach you some grammatical pattern, and just like trying to make it so that you see a lot of examples where you vary some critical piece of it so that you can generalize. We don't just show you the same sentence over and over again, because we want you to see that some rule applies maybe to all kinds of different verbs and so on.
Yeah. I can imagine you've probably got some kind of sort of almost picturing a mind map of a language, and you've broken it down into the patterns, and then there's like the edge cases and the difference. So like, but the scaffolding is starting at that very like you're covering as much as possible, like your surface area of that repetition with that repetition. Yeah.
And it's not easy because we have very short bite-sized lessons, and so actually a lot of thinking goes into how do we split up something like a grammar of a language into those tiny bits where we're going to show you something meaningful in a single lesson. It can't be too much, because if we pack too much, you're just going to get overwhelmed. So it has to be, it can't be too big, but it has to be meaningful so that you get something out of it, because you might only do one lesson, like in a day. And then over time, hope that this will all come together.
See the connections. Yeah. Fascinating sort of balancing act there. So to close out this part on the learning design, I want to come back to another thing we talked about, of like following your curiosity and kind of doing this in like an exploratory way versus having a very structured linear thing. How do you think of that balance when you exposing someone to a new language?
Of how non-linear it is.
Yeah, like how much of it? Yeah, how much do you let people just wander and like kind of go off in different directions to get the same outcome than someone who's maybe following like a lesson by lesson approach?
Duolingo is pretty linear in that we have a path and we make people follow a certain path. That is actually mainly so that we minimize this kind of fatigue that learners might have, if the choice fatigue. Like, okay, what do I do today? And so we try to make it easy for people to know, okay, what they should do. Okay, the next lesson, I'm just going down the path. But within the path, we are trying to insert randomness in what exact content you see. And there's some degree of freedom that you have to explore, to do some additional quests, maybe to go back and review if you want. But actually, Duolingo is pretty structured in terms of just telling you what to do next and how we're teaching you. We are discussing constantly now, especially with AI, how we can personalize the experience more. And so that's something that will be very exciting for the future, to see, can we actually offer different topics maybe to different learners? Maybe we teach the same grammatical point, but we actually teach one person this point with a topic related to sports, and another person with a topic on music, because we know maybe that's what they like better. Things like that. So we haven't really done that, but that's interesting. That's, I think, a possibility for the future.
Yeah. Okay. That's a cool way to end off this little section. And then, kind of teasing out what's possible. I'm sure that we could do an entire podcast episode on that as you start to explore AI. But let's I want to shift focus a little bit back to kind of the team building and leadership stuff as well. It's obviously a big part of this podcast, and building a culture of learning inside the team that you're responsible for. And so let's start on this AI, because I think that's obviously top of mind for a lot of people I talk to in the space. A lot of people trying to figure out what kind of skills do we need now, right? Like Duolingo just announced recently, you're going to be an AI first company. You're going to prioritize figuring out how to do things with AI first to then, leverage and I guess free up people for more strategic and creative work. And so as you think about kind of the skills that are necessary to be able to do that well, to be able to work with AI well, the World Economic Forum and a bunch of others have released data on this, but what are you seeing practically as the most important skills for your team?
I would say, the most important thing are really the technical skills, and then them actually bringing their expertise and learning how to work with LLMs, because that's really what they do right now. And so being able to learn those skills, and we are continuously trying to help them up level in this area by training them and giving them more professional development opportunities, and just kind of generally working with AI. But then there are a lot of if you're asking also about kind of like the skills I want them to have, what I've seen kind of more of the soft skills, definitely versatility is something that that's very important. Being able to just tackle many different problems. Things are changing so fast that the people who are doing the best are the people who, we can deploy to do anything. They can work on developing our curricula, or they can work on developing a new conversational feature, or maybe they can even work on math that we're now building, or music, or a different subject. So the more versatile they are, and the more open to this kind of change, the better. And also just being able to quickly adapt. So this adaptability to new environments, to this uncertainty, because nobody knows where things are going. That's very important. And generally, what I look for is this mindset. I call it a technical mindset, but really what it means is that you are not afraid of technology and of, even coding. You don't need to code now with AI. AI can help you with that, but you shouldn't be afraid of it. And understanding the basic concepts of coding can then help you use AI to do the coding. And so I think the people who have the mindset that, okay, this, I can learn this, I want to learn this, and being open to that helps a lot.
Yeah, it's almost like a first principles mindset, right? To be able to go back to that and then apply that thinking to any domain. Also, kind of goes back to that interdisciplinarity we talked about. I was going to ask you, I didn't want to interrupt you though, but going back to the technical skills thing, are you focusing more on tool specific, LLMs that you're using, or is it more first principles of how to prompt and how to, how do you think of the balance of those two?
It's definitely both, but the tools are changing. So we're testing different models, we're building different tools or using different tools. So it really, I would say it's more about the first principles and how to actually prompt, what are the best practices, how to build evaluators, conceptually, how you do that. And then if you have a good understanding of that, then it doesn't really matter what exact tool you're using. That you can learn pretty quickly.
Okay, another big question mark for people in this space, and specifically what we're talking about is, and you mentioned versatility and adaptability and let's say first principles thinking. How do you identify people who are like, how do you know what good looks like in those areas, so that you can look at your team or any team and go, okay, here's my sort of top 10% talent I cannot afford to lose because they just get it, right? Like, how do you know who those people are?
You just see the impact of their work. I mean, it's actually, in a way, is not that difficult. We really try to push people and give people different opportunities, put them on different tasks, and then see what happens. And then the people who do well, they will get more opportunities, different opportunities. You might try to put them on a harder task. And so we can quickly see who has the skills and who is developing skills faster. And that's so we see that pretty quickly.
That makes total sense. Yeah. You can often get very like for like comparisons there, where you see, like you said, the output that person delivers. So if you think more broadly now about some of the challenges of developing talent, what do you see are the current challenges, and maybe some speculation on what the future challenges might be?
Honestly, I feel like the biggest challenge is time. So within this culture that we have of shipping and just trying to do a lot of things, move fast, it's actually hard to carve out time for just learning new things, developing new skills. So we have to be very intentional about it. Of course, sometimes it just happens naturally because, okay, well, here's this new technology, it's generative AI. We're going to adopt it. Everyone is learning it. And so we're kind of company-wide, it's like an initiative. But sometimes it's less obvious, like maybe that people have certain projects, they need to deliver on them, but we want them in parallel to be learning some skills, to be developing something, and we need to help them carve out that time without jeopardizing the goals.
Yeah. I mean, do you think AI is going to help with that?
Maybe. I mean, in general, AI is definitely making us more productive. We can already see that. The problem is that, we're becoming more productive, so their expectations are higher. So I feel like at a company like Duolingo, it kind of never changes in a way. There's always this high pressure of like, we need to produce. Let's move fast. Now we can move fast with AI. Well, let's move even faster. So I feel like it's like an interesting tension, which I feel is a good one. It's just what's on my mind is really we need to be intentional about making sure that people are not left behind. Like, we're not letting at least some people work on projects where maybe they don't have a chance to develop certain skills that we know they will need, a few months from now. And so finding those opportunities, like, okay, well, we need them to work on this project right now, but let's just give them some time to like, I don't know, like work a little bit with AI so that they keep developing those skills.
Yeah, that is a very big one. And I mean, how do you, like, just to use another thing, like someone clearly needs communication sort of skills, right? Like they struggle to like communicate their point insightfully and impact. How do you give them opportunities to do that while, sort of limiting the risk or the downside of that?
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. So actually communication is a good example because it's a big one for my team. I feel like especially because these are all experts in teaching and learning, but often the way we all communicate with other roles is just a little bit too too jargony, and we don't make it clear enough, and we don't make it accessible enough to others. And so yes, communication is definitely a skill that I feel like almost everyone on my team needs to continue developing, including myself. And so we try to find spaces that are a little bit lower pressure, lower risk. We have those weekly meetings that are just for the whole role. And we often do little workshops, little trainings where we try to get people to, so for example, actually we have a training on communication coming up this week, and there will be just like a little workshop where people will go into small groups and actually practice. They'll have to present something, imagining that they're presenting to the senior leadership, and then they get roasted by
that's awesome.
by others.
That's
like trying to get that feeling of, okay, you're getting tough questions. How do you answer them? So we try to do things like that to help people develop those skills.
Yeah, that's it's a psychologically a safe environment as well, because you're with your team, and everyone's trying to make each other better there. So I love that. Okay, I'm checking the time, so I've got time for one more question, and so we're gonna have to skip a few that we had set aside to talk about, but this has been just fantastic. Let me just think here, which of these two? Let's end with this one. So as let's cast our eyes forward, or you cast your eyes forward, and you touched on it a little bit, like how you can maybe use AI to personalize the context or the examples for people. But what is the next frontier for language learning and maybe just learning in general?
And I actually do think that personalization is a big one, because this is where technology can really help a lot. And Duolingo has always tried to be personalized in some ways, and many products have been. But I think now it can just change completely. We can become much, much smarter at how we cater to each person, really knowing their weaknesses, their strengths, what exactly we should be doing, how we should be teaching them. And there's with generative AI, I think it's going to be much, much easier to do that. And we'll be able to operate at a scale that just we haven't been able to before. And so personalize in ways that maybe we haven't even imagined before. Because I feel like personalization used to be focused much more just on this, like, okay, like, are we getting at like the right level for you? Is this too hard, too easy, or is it just right? But I think we can personalize also for engagement, for motivation. Like what I mentioned, we can, because it's going to be so easy to create content,
right?
That we can then serve different people very different content, depending on what they like, depending on what resonates with them, what's motivating to them. And so I feel like that will really transform education, where we'll really be able to cater to each individual. That's very exciting to me.
That is exciting. Will there always be a human in the loop?
Hopefully.
Yeah, we all do, right? We all hope.
Hopefully we will all keep our jobs to some extent. Obviously, it's hard to predict what will happen, but from what I'm seeing right now, it seems pretty clear that humans in the loop are very helpful, and it doesn't seem to be going away anytime soon, because humans provide the structure for AI. AI can't really teach exactly. You have to really tell it how you direct it, guide it, how exactly to teach, depending on the context, depending on what you're teaching. We when we started using AI for generating content, for building new experiences, well, we quickly realized its limitations, where we really needed expert humans, because we needed them to actually articulate to AI, okay, these are the things that we need, that you need to be paying attention to. You need to create these types of content, and they all have those different requirements, and you need to be thinking about all sorts of pedagogical requirements. And then when we evaluate the output, well, these are the things that we evaluate. And AI can't really do that. I mean, it can suggest some things, but it's not going to be right.
Yeah, I think it's that taste and discernment and all of that we were talking about earlier. Yeah. Bozena, as always, I just love picking your brain on this stuff. So thanks for spending an hour with me today. And yeah, thanks for coming on the show.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a lot of fun.
Hello. I hope you enjoyed that episode. It's Andrew again with a quick message. If you'd like to support the show, the best way to do that is to leave us ratings and reviews where you listened. If you're on YouTube, hit the like and subscribe buttons and feel free to leave a comment. We love hearing from our listeners and viewers. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, please take the time to give us a rating and leave a review. Once again, we love hearing from our loyal listeners. If you're listening to this on Spotify, please hit the follow button to make sure that you don't miss new episodes as they come out. See you next week for another episode of the Learning Culture Podcast. Thank you for listening.